Hello and good morning. Welcome to the Remedy. Um, I'm Melody Jacinto, and this is my sister Will. I'm going to be your host today. Yeah.
No more adults.
So today's show is on Gen Z, and oftentimes you'll hear this generation is so lazy, so entitled. We've gone soft. We're offended by everything, and you're so self-absorbed. We're not, and we certainly but Gen Z is a generation born in the 90s and early 2000s. And we're the first generation to grow up completely saturated by the internet and social media. And it influences almost every aspect of our lives, especially now that we're under lockdown and stuff like that. So today, Gen Z is going to do what we're known best for, and we're going to talk about ourselves on the internet for everybody to see. Here with us, we have our cousin Nikki. Hi, Nikki. If you'd like to unmute and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Nikki, and yes, as they said, I am their cousin, just slightly older and beautiful. I'm from Canada, so I'm currently living in Montreal, Canada, and I have studied in communications. I have my degree, an honors bachelor's degree in communications and media. I also have a diploma in music business administration, and I have a graduate diploma in business administration. I've worked most in the media and marketing field. I also I'm also an artist and also a podcaster and radio host here in the city. So
Yeah.
yes.
Down below, I have my friend Caitlin. Hey, Kate.
Hiya, my name is Caitlin. There's, I guess, about me is that I'm currently studying to be a veterinarian. So my major is in animal science pre-vet, and I go to Cal Poly Pomona, which can be found in California where I live. I work at a bunch of different volunteer centers or vet clinics so that I could gain enough experience to, hopefully be able to be a successful vet. So that's a bit about me.
And then Josh, we go to high school together. You can introduce yourself though.
Um, I'm Josh. I'm in high school. I wrestle, I play piano, and yeah.
All right, so we're gonna head right into our topics today.
Oh well, no, we got Jaden back.
There we go. So we have our other cousin Jaden. Let's see if you can intro himself.
Oh, my name is Jaden. I play basketball. I go to Miami Northern Senior High. I'm a high schooler. I'm in the 10th grade. I play football too. And I like to I like to participate in a lot of things. So I'm happy.
All right, bud. Happy to have you guys here. Um, so I think our first question is, what exactly do you think is causing like this vast disconnect between like the older generations and ours? Because we saw a bit with like millennials and like boomers and things like that, but it's exacerbated kind of because of the age of the internet. So what exactly do you think is like the main problem with like the main area in which older generations can't really see eye to eye to us?
I think if I could speak, well, first of all, I've never felt older than I do now, so that's great. I'm for the purposes of this, I'm 26 years old, so I'm kind of a little bit outside of Gen Z. I'm still considered a millennial, but a lot of like older millennials, because the oldest millennials are almost 40, and the youngest millennials are 25. So for when it comes to older millennials, sometimes they'll look at us as, oh, kind of like Gen Z or like on the cusp of that, and but also we have a lot of millennial tendencies, which confuses us a lot about like your generation or my brother's generation or things like this. So I feel like when it comes to the disconnect, it's not really a disconnect more as it is like a cycle. It's every generation always feels that way from the older generation. You know what I mean? I'm sure that when generation, what is it, Alpha, the one that comes after Z?
I think so.
I'm sure that you guys, when you guys get there, you guys be looking at Alpha like, what are they doing? You know what I mean? And I feel like it's a natural progression of when things are done differently than
Yeah.
what you're used to. So you're like, well, our way was the best, when it's really not, because we're supposedly with each generation we're supposed to be getting better, right? We're supposed to be improving. And I think that is specifically your generation has done so much in moving in terms of social issues and acceptance.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I feel
Yeah,
like
I agree with what
it's
she said. It's
understanding.
Hold on. Which one?
go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead, Jaden. You can go first, and then we'll hit Josh next.
I feel like it's just understanding. I feel like the two generations don't really understand each other. It's a different point of view, so we don't really see eye to eye as much. That's why there's always a problem. I feel like they don't see what we accomplished, and we don't see what they accomplished. So I feel like that's what the big tension is. That's why I feel like it's just, oh, they don't do this or we don't do that. It's just because they don't see what we don't. We look at something different, more different than how they look at it. They're a little bit, let's say, old school. So, and we're new school to them. So it's like, oh, we see it this way. We look at it this way. They're like, nah, it's supposed to be this way. So that's why I say it's understanding. They don't understand it the same way we understand it.
You think people don't want to adapt? Maybe I just off of your point, Jaden, like it's like two-sided, right? So the older generation doesn't want to adapt to what is new and happening, doesn't want to change their ways. Then the younger generation, there may be a sort of lack of respect or an ignorance there in like knowing what was done before and what did work previously, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think like our perspective is based off of our environment and like just what we grew up in, and like these different generations, there's so many differences. It's hard to just like see eye to eye on certain issues, because I feel like with each generation some things get better and some things get worse. So as we're advancing in technology, which they didn't have back then, so we have a whole different way of life, right? So um I feel like it's just, as she said, we're lacking in respect, but we're moving forward. We move forward in some things and we go back in other things. And to go off of what he said, uh, it's just, damn, I forgot what I was gonna say. My bad.
I think even with like millennials, even though we both grew up with the internet, millennials can like actually remember a time where it wasn't like everywhere. Um, and like even on like TikTok, like recently, the millennials and Gen Z kind of butt heads. It's like, oh, middle parts and skinny jeans. It was funny, but I think like even our viewpoints about like cancel culture and things like that are kind of different. Um, because I think Gen Z wants to hold people accountable a lot more strongly than the past generations. Like in the conversations about Eminem, like millennials were like really sticking up for him, and I was like, wait a minute, but we're right. Like he does have like some terrible lyrics about like women and gay people, and it's like, what exactly are you guys defending? Are you defending the fact that he's from your generation, or are you just against cancel culture itself? So what do you guys exactly think about cancel culture? Like, do you believe that somebody can be truly canceled?
Cancel culture is kind of a joke. And it's not really any specific generation's fault in terms of what it is, but I feel like currently in terms of the online generation, people who are online, which is mostly millennials and Gen Z, there are some Gen X, and of course there are some boomers as well, online. But when it comes to cancel culture, which is, somebody who has done something that offends society as a whole generally, getting canceled, meaning getting cut off substantially by the community, meaning we're not, if they're an artist, we're not purchasing their music anymore, we're not streaming their music, we're not watching their films, we are not contributing to their business. This happens a lot. We saw it happen with H&M, we saw it happen with R. Kelly, we saw it happen with Doja Cat. These people, most of it's outrage for a bit, and then people come back to it, because what it is I think, as general human nature, people value their own comfort, their own nostalgia, their own memories above some random stranger. And this is how they see it. And I'm not saying this is my opinion. I'm saying like let's say with R. Kelly, I have had people tell me, well, Step in the Name of Love is particular to me. I love that song. I love that music. And I don't know that girl. I don't know those women. And people are inherently, a lot of them, selfish, and they will put their own wants and needs above those of strangers. Now, it changes once it's your sister, once it's your mother, once it's your best friend. Of course it changes. But until it hits close to home, cancel culture is subjective.
I think at first cancel culture was effective, but I feel as though we've taken it a little bit too far, because let's say, during after the after the killing of George Floyd, there was like, that's when that cancel culture really blew up. So I feel like it was effective at first, and it was created for the right reasons, but we take it too far. And an example of that, I'd say, was like, let's say I've seen people post on Instagram like, this guy, when we was in like the fourth grade, okay, he's like in college now. When we're in the fourth grade, he called me the N-word, cancel him. And I'm like, this person it's been like 14 years. This person is a completely different person now, and he has apologized. And while you should still be, held accountable for your past mistakes, at a certain point, it's not effective. It's not the best way to go about it. If they've already been educated and they already learned, okay, what I did was wrong, right? And they're not continuing to follow in their what they did before, cancel culture is just
I think
at what point is an apology, I'm sorry to cut you off, at what point is an apology sincere, or is it PR damage, control, damage control?
I think
I
it's
feel like
hard to be able to tell, because you don't know the that you're canceling, especially if they're not in your real life. Like, for instance, Doja Cat, we all like kind of saw how that whole thing snowballed, but then I sat back and I'm like, okay, well, I'm a fan of her music, but that doesn't mean to say I know her personally. Like, her apology could be totally just PR, or it could be very genuine. I feel like maybe for me, sometimes I just try to pick and choose when I choose to support someone or not. But then I also have to sit back and I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm never going to know these people in real life. Like, they're celebrities, they're just an image that I see, and I just consume whatever they put out. So it's kind of hard to try to cancel people that you don't know. I feel like I don't want to say easier, but it's different when it's someone you see every day, like, okay, a student near you that did something problematic.
Yeah, I think in some ways cancel culture has kind of been cheapened because it's been used so often, because it was meant to bring awareness about people who have done like terrible things or things that they shouldn't be supported for, at least financially. But because like there's jokes that's like, oh, everybody's getting canceled, kind of makes like things that are actually serious to get done. I've seen like James Charles canceled like 6 times. And every time he comes back with a new brand deal. So, I mean, it's not really effective anymore.
I think it can be effective. I don't want to say used in the right way, but the main thing is usually to bring awareness. Like the people that you support, if they have problematic actions that repeat constantly, maybe you should evaluate the people that you're choosing to actively support all the time and say, well, what am I consuming from them that might be affecting my own behavior? Because I see a lot of people, for instance, like Shane Dawson. This is sad to say, I used to watch him. And then I found out he was doing blackface and like making a lot of inappropriate jokes. And then I had to reevaluate. I was like, okay, well, some of the jokes he makes in his newer videos, I shouldn't be like listening to. Like as a black person, looks a little bad on my part. So I was
Can I
just
ask
like,
who that
maybe,
is?
Oh, he was like a big YouTuber.
yeah.
Um,
He like was on the platform practically since it started
yeah,
up until I think recently when YouTube suspended his account because
yeah.
that was bad. But I had to sit back and I was just like, yeah, no, the jokes he's making are very insensitive and not the type of media that I want to consume, and I don't want to support someone that kind of makes me look bad. Like it was a little embarrassing. I used to get clowned by her and I was like, dang, you might be right.
Yeah.
I saw comment from Patty talking about um the generation before kind of leading the way for like the reasoning why people can be so outspoken and these days. And I completely agree with that. I think when it comes to cancel culture, there's a pretty big divide between millennials and Gen Z, and kind of being, you know, on both sides a little bit. I can understand it because millennials are much more fickle. We're a little bit more hesitant to cancel certain things. We're like, okay, let's look at the rationale. Why are we just canceling this person? Whereas Gen Z, that's very passionate, and it comes with the youth. You know what I mean? It's very like, we're done with that. We're done with this, and this is how it's gonna be. And millennials, we've kind of been through certain things where we know things can't be that clean cut. Like things can't. If there are, it's like we're like, okay, if you're gonna cancel Eminem, you gotta cancel this person. You gotta cancel everyone. Then we're not gonna listen to anything. And Gen Z's like, yeah, sure, okay, let's cancel all of them. Like, yeah, exactly that. Let's get rid of all of them. And we're like, okay, you know.
Yeah, I think Gen Z has a kind of like reputation of being like really reactive. And I think that's because of social media, because like everything we see is amplified. Before, like there were internet celebrities and platforms, things like that. Um, like now the average person can become like a personality, and they can get a huge following just from being themselves, or like having a persona that they put on.
And we're able to interact with them. Like we have lives on Instagram where you can comment and and the person that you're commenting on the post, they can actually see and interact with you on that level, which I think also creates like a connection, but at the same time not, because you still don't know them, but you're able to interact with them online, which I think, because in the past it like if you see a celebrity, you only see them in their works and then maybe, well, depending on the time, in photos or something, or like maybe a few interviews. Didn't get the same interaction, you know?
We have these same interactions with like ourselves as well. Like I can have like 45 people on my Insta, and I don't necessarily have to know them, but we can all see each other's posts and things like that and interact and like share our thoughts and feelings. So the information that we pass to each other spreads farther much faster. So once an idea like kind of takes, it can take within 24 hours across the world. So I think our voices kind of like we have the ability to be heard a lot more easily than past generations did.
Going back to the whole cancel culture thing, I feel like the only time that is effective is, let's say we see someone who is like, just let's say there's someone who we know is racist, right? Let's say we cancel them, so we stop them from becoming our doctors, police officers, nurses, so that when they like, because when they get in these senators, when they get in these positions of power, then they can, like, affect the everyday lives of other people. So I feel like the only time cancel culture is like really effective is if one of our senators or a doctor or someone who's being openly racist, like, you cancel them and you get them fired, or you prevent them from even becoming like even getting to a position of power where they could, like, negatively affect the lives of other people. Whereas, and the same goes with, like, maybe celebrities that affect a lot of people, but I don't think canceling really does anything when it's like some
Average person.
yeah,
Right.
some random person.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we have to be more careful about why we're canceling people and how far we're willing to take things, because there are people who get doxxed on the internet for saying something. It's like, you don't know anything besides this person's profile, and you're endangering them in front of the entire world. Doxing, I should probably explain that for everybody, is it's like when a hacker can find, like, your IP address, and then they'll put your information online. So they'll take your address,
Your phone number.
your phone number, your school, things like that. And potentially it can ruin lives or put people in great danger.
Mm-hmm.
So I think certainly things get taken too far, especially when it's the average person. And I think we have to really be careful about why we're doing things rather than just getting that reaction out.
For me, I think a big thing about cancel culture when it comes to like senators or government or anything involved with that, I think it's absolutely essential, because that way we could kind of weed out all the, bad or negative things that we don't want to be our future, essentially. But with celebrities, it's absolutely different, because a lot of people look up to celebrities, and they personalize themselves with them. They try to relate themselves with him. So because of that, we, like, when they do something bad, we essentially think, oh, maybe it's this one thing, or it was a mistake, or that they're trying and they're going to grow. And while I completely agree. Yes, somebody can grow from their previous thoughts. I do not think that it's fair that we just keep on saying we're going to cancel them and then go right back to them. And I think another thing that contributes to that is that it's the forbidden fruit. The more attention they have, the celebrity has at least, the more people are going to be either more lenient toward them, or they'll be more negative to how they respond to it, which obviously makes sense. But, I think it's just because of their fame and their money, or like their popularity, of course, there's going to be a rift in how people see them and how they actually react to whatever they do.
Yeah, I think especially like with celebrity culture now, we've kind of tricked ourselves into these parasocial interactions with them. Like, we think that we know them, even though we only see what they present to the cameras. And the internet has exacerbated that, because we have access to their lives, their streams. It's not just interviews anymore every couple months. Like, they can interact with us personally, like on Twitter or Instagram and things like that. And so we think that we know them. We think that we like to think that the people that we like and we look up to are good people. And unfortunately, that could just be a persona. But yeah, I think it's a little harder for people to tell the difference, especially when you're young on the internet, for you to tell the difference between what's real and what's not when you're talking about celebrities.
Exactly, like 100%. I think it, and it's also, as you were saying, like, it's the connections that we have with them, right? You're more, as Caitlin was saying, like, you're kind of more willing to forgive because you want to forgive, because even though you don't know those people, because they've been in your face so much, you want to feel like you know them. And when it comes to, I would like Generation X as well, like, and also millennials, there has always been celebrities that we are a little close to, and we want to kind of find a defense for them. Two specific examples, will be R. Kelly and Michael Jackson. Now, most people would say that both the situations are different because there's kind of like irrefutable proof of R. Kelly, whereas Michael Jackson has been exonerated, proven, innocent multiple times and all of this stuff. So it's like, I feel like sometimes with Gen Z, they're less, they have a, how would you say, rose-colored glasses view of the world, which means, they kind of see everything as like, oh, well, everything can be fine. We can fix this right away. We can do this and it will be good. Whereas, unfortunately, millennials and Gen X have gone through certain things where they're like, yo, like, not everything is clean cut. The government's lying to everybody. There are fake stories that can be planted about people. And yes, there are rhetorics of like the black man being taken down, or targeting specific powerful people in society. So we understand that sometimes something may be happening and it's not exactly what is at face value, you know what I mean? Whereas most Zoomers, they don't have a lot of that responsibility yet. They don't have a lot of that experience yet, which only comes with age, obviously. But it's like many of you guys are still like, living at home, learning, where most millennials are out of the home. Now they have something to fight for. As one of the comments said previously, there is a growing influence in millennials, which also adds a growing responsibility. So with more responsibility, now you're more conscious of what you say. Now you're like, ooh, I don't want to say this and get canceled. I don't want to say this about this person and get a check taken away from me. I'm trying to get to the bag and y'all are trying to like, blow everything up. So that's the little differences between our generations. It's like Gen Z don't give a, you know what I mean? It's like we don't have anything to lose currently is what y'all saying. So it's like, yes, blow it up, blow the system up. And what I do love about your generation as well is how you guys have been challenging rape culture amongst the men and the young boys or the young men in the generation has been really impactful, I would say.
Yeah. I think growing up on the internet, and I don't know if this is just me, but there's kind of like this hyper awareness about like what you're doing and who you are. And yeah, um, I think our leniency towards like what we put on the internet is, I want to say it's both more so than the previous generations and less so. Like I could go on a 15-minute rant on Twitter about anything, but you would not catch me putting my social security in a random site, and that's something that happens to a lot of like the elder generation because they really don't know what like phishing scams and things like that are.
Yeah.
So I think like we are so hyper aware of our own presence on the internet that sometimes we expect that same hyper awareness on other people, and that's where we get caught up. Because I'm like, I would never say these kinds of things on the internet for millions of people to see.
So why would you?
So how did you feel comfortable putting that? But I think that depends on everybody's threshold and obviously like how they grew up and things like that.
There's a comment that says Gen Z acts and then thinks about their actions later, which, I mean, yes and no. I think for some, of course, but I also think that's every generation because older generations tend to unfortunately be susceptible to like those little scams on the internet. They're just like, well, I'll still give them the money, I'll help someone out without thinking of the consequences of this could potentially put me at risk for one being scammed or them getting information that I do not want someone else to have. I also think that happens with our generation too. We think, oh, well, I'll just put this on the internet. It's funny or, it might be a little problematic, but it's okay for now up until it's time for an employer or someone or just someone you that may be older that knows you. And you're just like, well, you maybe don't put that on the internet. It kind of makes you look bad,
Yeah.
I do think, but I just think that might come with every single generation because even though we've grown up with the internet way more, we still are learning because the internet is constantly changing.
Yeah.
There's always something new that's going on. Sometimes I feel like I can't even keep up and I'm only 16. So,
yeah, I think it's hard because we are saturated with content. something is always happening. We have live news on Twitter, live news on YouTube. Um, someone's always posting. Someone's always on TikTok. It's hard to remain focused on things that we want to remain focused on, especially when it comes to like things that we really care about. Like I think, and this is kind of one of my qualms with like Gen Z. I think we are so stuck on our phones sometimes that we think that awareness about a topic is enough. And I think for obviously younger kids, you can't go out and you can't go protest at like 15, 14. Like it's dangerous for you. But sometimes we get stuck in like the awareness phase of a movement. Um,
rather than the action
that has to take place, and like pressuring our senators, pressuring the people in power to actually change something rather than just letting it cycle all over the internet.
Yeah, I noticed that a lot with like the recent protests that kind of blew up after the unfortunate deaths of like George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. I noticed that, we're reposting, we're saying, do this. But honestly, most people weren't doing the things that people in the post were saying to do, like calling senators, trying to find organizations to donate to. It was just, you kind of felt peer pressured almost because you see tons of other people posting the same post. So you're just like, well, I need a post too. I want to look aware, or, like I'm focused on these issues too. I do think it is important to bring awareness, but at the same time, you have to take action if you're able to. You can only be so aware, okay, yeah, a repost, that's good and all, but are you looking at the stuff that you're actually consuming? There's helpful information on those things, or are you looking into the history to see why this might be a problem and how it affects people today? And I've realized I used to fall into that loop too, where I'm like, well, I should repost this. Maybe someone needs it. But then I'm like, well, what is something actionable I can do? Am I able to donate, even if it's not a lot of money? Or am I able to like support the protesters that are going out and are able to, hold up the signs and everything?
I think something that the younger generation that like we can't really go out and protest and whatever, and I think something we need to do is just hold each other accountable, like because that makes it, no matter how little a difference it makes, if everyone makes that little difference, it's gonna have a big impact. So I feel as though when we're made aware about these certain issues, like we gotta hold each other accountable, even though we can't go out and protest. Like let's take the movement against like anti-rape and all that stuff, right? So when you catch your friends making like an out-of-pocket joke, instead of laughing, question them, make them feel uncomfortable, like these little things, no matter how small, they're gonna make an impact.
Yeah, I think that that has been one of the things that have really helped, especially when we were talking about rape culture a little earlier. A lot of the time, I think past generations, and this is just something that I was thinking about, because we are called hypersensitive. We're called, oh, you guys are too reactive. It's not that big a deal. I think past generations have kind of been made to think that they have to be okay with certain things. And Gen Z, because we have the ability to talk to each other constantly without interruption and like really dissect these things together, we don't have to feel that way. So I think when we're called sensitive, I think it's more so our eyes are a little bit open to how everyone feels about it. Like it's uncomfortable for girls to have to deal with these things, and then boys do nothing about it, or they're like, oh, that's just the bad apples. The bad apples are everywhere though. And it's becoming more apparent because we have like all this proof, and so some things cannot be ignored anymore. So I think it's easy to think that, oh, we're just making a big deal out of things, But if a lot of people are making a big deal about something, I think it might be a bigger deal than some people think it is.
I love it. And you know, and we've been talking about that and how you guys are reactive and whatever and all of that. But I I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a great thing. You know what I mean? Yes, the of course it's great to like think about things a little bit and have a sort of strategy, but that passion is wonderful to see at times, and it's kind of like it's reassuring to see that people won't stand for certain things, because the things that I have stood for, I see that people coming up are not standing for. Like specifically, like I was talking to somebody, younger, I think 18, just starting out her degree, and she, had started this internship or whatever, and she was telling me about how like she was telling certain people off in the workplace certain like, microaggressions that she wasn't accepting. And I was like, my goodness, like I took all of that and I internalized all of that, and I had to, still to this day when I face certain types of, racism in the workplace, because that's what it is, it's racism. um when I face some of these things, I have that repercussion in the back of my head, like, oh well, if you say that, you're gonna be the angry black woman. If you say this, you're gonna be like, you're gonna be pegged as such, as as how they see you. And it's like I see this in the younger generation. They don't have that fear sometimes. So I'm like, wow, that's so great to know that, like, maybe like something that we had done in the past has sparked that in them, and that's a great thing to see. And I don't think it's always a bad thing. I do think that of course everything can be refined, and I think that the next generation after you guys will be even more on point in that aspect. What I think is very scary in Gen Z is how quickly things change. Because I would say, like, by the end of high school for me, the earliest thing we had was Instagram, you know what I mean? And that was at the end. Like I didn't have that during, like, I don't know what that would have been like during schooling and all of that. I think it would have been pretty scary to have like people like that. We had BBM. I don't know if that's a thing that you guys know. Okay. So I'm just not gonna age myself here. But yeah, like it's a thing that like we didn't expect that things were going to change this quick. Like even for me, like some of the degrees, the stuff that I have, I'm realizing younger people are like,
Did we lose her? Yeah, I think we might have lost her. Oh no.
Well, we can wait for her to come back,
Yeah.
and then we'll answer a comment.
Yeah. I had a comment from Markel saying, members of Gen Z are powerful. They can change the world. They must stand on something solid. Gen Z normally rides the wave. 1 week we on this, the next week we're on something else. I actually agree with this. I think
Wait, can I
because
say
we
something about that though?
I think because we are so saturated with content, and there's a lot going on in the world all the time, and we're constantly bombarded with it. It's hard for us to focus on something.
That's exactly
So
what I was gonna
when
say.
we're on something, we're not on it for very long. And I think that we need to put more attention into the things that we're supporting, into the movements that we're trying to build, because these things take time. So I think we have to be able to dedicate more times to something. But the internet moves fast, and we have to be able to take a step back and reevaluate those situations.
I feel like the reason why we move on so fast is like you said, is that we get so much information. Like we see all these things, oh this happened, oh that happened, there's so much news. So like the reason why we ride the waves is because we're trying to catch up. We're trying to see what's going on. We like I feel like Gen Z is not like, well, I'm not gonna say kids, but we have the attention. Like we like the, oh, that's like a key. Oh, let me see what that is. Oh, I want to see. Oh no, that's a new thing. Let me see what that is. I feel like it's not really a problem, but sometimes it can be a problem. And I feel like when we ride the wave and when we hop on a new trend and see this, hop on a new app, it starts to be calm, but then when it starts to blow up, it starts to become a problem because of how people ride on it, and then with the older generations, they won't understand us on it because they're like, we were never moving this fast. We're all like this because we have the communications to do that. So that's why I
We've kind of
feel
had to
that's why you might
speed up.
say, yeah, like we're speeding up, and they're still like, yo, catch up. So that's why I feel like the millennials are always like, oh, we're on a new wave. It's not that we're on a new wave. We're just trying to get to the next thing, the next level. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we just don't have patience sometimes. Like we see problems and we're like, you guys been dealing with this since what, like the 1900s? Like we can move on, like
Yeah,
speed this up. Like if we can have change now, why wait? Like let's try to get the ball rolling, which can be a good and a bad thing because we're like, no, we don't want to tolerate this anymore in like the next decade. But then we also like we need to also spend time to realize the problems that we're seeing so we
Yeah.
can try to break it down properly.
I think sometimes the issue is that these problems are so deep rooted, like the racism in America. Like these are deep seated problems that we are not the first generation to really talk about them. Unfortunately, change has not come as quickly as we want it to. Um, and obviously, the past generations have felt this frustration for much longer. Um, so I think there's kind of a disconnect because we're like, okay, but why is this still happening at this point? So I think the frustration kind of comes from like, why does it have to be that we're still dealing with this? Why do we have to combat this as well? Like why hasn't change already been sparked?
Mm-hmm.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry about that. I had my computer. Anyways, so if I just wanted to understand, like, in terms of everything that's happening, you guys are more frustrated because we're
Yeah.
still having to. Okay, that's where. Okay,
it's
the
like
the
it's
frustration.
old news. It's old
Yeah.
news. While we still like, if such and such has a problem, right? Gen Z is like, okay, well, we have a problem with each other. Let's just get our sorries on and keep it moving. Where the older generations are like, I'm not really. Do I really want to? And we're like, no, just do it. Just move on and keep it moving. But like the other generation is like, do you really understand what our problem is? And we don't. That's the problem with the, oh, we're on a new wave, because they don't really understand what the problems are or what the new things are. They don't understand how we see it. Like I
Well,
said
I'm telling
before,
you, that's because people have gotten comfortable. People have gotten
yeah,
comfortable with the way things are, and the point where you're comfortable is the point where you never want to be. You always want to be in discomfort. You always want to be growing and evolving. And unfortunately, a lot of the older generations have just been like, you know what? F this. I'm tired. This is good right here. And like, honestly, generations before us have been like, they were fighting, they were marching, they were doing what they needed to do. So like, yes, of course, sometimes they're probably just like, yo, like, we've done this before, it doesn't work. But what they don't understand is you guys are doing it with tools that we never had, with tools that never existed. So and with a passion that I've never seen, you know what I mean? So I do think that there is a potential for it to work. And I do think that sometimes the older generation could be a little negative to the actions that are being taken. Or like, oh, well, whatever, that's not going to work. Like, y'all are, y'all don't know what y'all doing or whatever. And I don't think that that's true necessarily. I think that there is a method to the madness currently.
Yeah. All right, we were just joined by our friend Nix.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
And then we'll like hop right back into the convo.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, so we just got another question, but I think this is from our dad. Gen Z is considered the loneliest generation as their endless hours spent online can foster feelings of isolation and depression. What are your thoughts? It's just the endless hours of online. I think being on social media can kind of exacerbate these issues, because like when you're on, Nikki, you're telling us you had Instagram like kind of popped up when you were in high school. For us, Instagram was like middle school, elementary school. It
Yeah, it's
was
been
like
here for a while.
it's kind of our whole lives. Um, so I think like when you're constantly comparing yourselves to people and that you're constantly trying to keep up, it can be kind of lonely because you think that you're the only person struggling. Because you see so many people doing it so much better than you, it can cause like a lot of feelings of like inadequacy and just like, okay, but what am I doing wrong? Is it me, or like what's going on? I think can be isolating, but it can also bring a lot of fun. Like there's good and bad in it. Like, so I think we can't just blame the internet for our problems.
Yeah, because I mean, all the generations before us, they were going through stuff where they were isolated and going through depression. Like the silent generation, they were bombarded with pain the entire time. So I think it does, with new territory comes new challenges, but at the same time, it's the same thing. Like maybe if I was living in the 60s, I would probably feel isolated and depressed too, because civil rights was going on and stuff. That wouldn't be great for me. But I don't know. I feel like the internet, it does make you feel lonely because, like she said, we feel lonely because we see other people doing well, but I also feel lonely because I'm like, y'all feel terrible too. We're all going through the same thing right now. Like, it doesn't help. Like,
Yeah. And COVID has kind of just
made it
stretched
worse.
the issue because we can't even go outside at this point.
Mm-hmm. There's another comment that says, how would Gen Z act if y'all lived during slavery times?
I would be a slave. I am not saying that I am better than slaves. Like I don't know how I would act.
I would be as the slaves were in that time.
I think that
depressed.
I think that when we're voicing our frustrations about the past, it's not saying that you guys weren't. It's kind of like you guys were doing everything that needed to be done and change still didn't occur. So we get why you're pessimistic about things, but we want to kind of avoid that, and we don't know how to avoid it, and so it's frustrating.
I think it's super cool that like because you mentioned earlier about the social media and everything, and obviously there's a lot of FOMO happening, and fear of missing out when you do see other people, and that can breed to isolation, depression, etc. But the other side of the coin is you can see everybody else who's going through it, whereas probably in the past, like in those days of the civil rights movement, you couldn't always kind of find people that will relate to you and understand what you're going through. And I know for me, specifically in this time, in this last year and some change that has gone by with COVID, it's very reassuring to me to see sometimes like, hey, like, okay, other people are feeling this way. Not everybody's being productive today. Good. Like, like it kind of, it helps a bit. I don't know if you guys feel that way.
I feel that exact same way. When I see like everybody like out and I'm not out, or I see certain people who are not out and I'm out, I feel like sometimes I wouldn't say it's depression. I would just say it's just boredom. I feel like right now during this COVID, it's a lot of kids and adults who are just bored, and they just when they see it, they like, oh, I want to do that. Oh, I can't do it. Now I'm starting to get sad and lonely. But for me, it's just curiosity and this boredom as in that aspect. For the question for the slavery, I feel like Gen Z would probably not do too bad, but I feel like they would get it too, because I feel like as a generation we are fighters. We will get our word heard, and I feel like during that time period, if you were a fighter, you wasn't making it. So I feel like we wouldn't do too bad. I feel like it would be hard for us. Yeah, we're so-called the soft generation, but we're not really soft. If the older generation just doesn't see it how we see it, so I feel like we would get our word heard. I feel like we would do pretty good.
I feel like a
Yeah,
lot of Gen Z members might during slavery they I feel like a lot of them might not have made it. Like because of how passionate you guys can be and sometimes like, the lack of thought, it would have been thinking like I'm just raw, I'm going into this and F you massa, all of that, and it would have been like a lot of, decapitated heads. I feel like there would have been a little less strategy. That's just my honest opinion. It's a strange question.
Yeah.
I feel like
Um,
um Gen Z wouldn't be um I just think the passion that we have and our awareness of certain issues and all this, it all comes from the time that we're living in. The reason we're allowed to be this outspoken, the reason why we can speak out without, certain repercussions is because the generation before us fought to have this freedom, and the generation before that fought to have this freedom. And the internet affected how we like it's just the environment you live in. Gen Z would not be Gen Z in slavery times, if that makes any sense. Like during times of slavery, we'd probably be like, you know, like the other slaves. We would feel because you have to like the slaves at that point, a lot of the slaves were born into it. That's all they knew. They didn't know it was possible for someone of color to walk free, to not do this work. They was born thinking, okay, I was made for one reason only, and that is to serve the white man. So um
That's
I
a
don't think
great
Gen Z
point.
will be the same.
That's
Not
a great point.
not
And
only that, but also a lot of slaves they went through stuff like bucking and whatnot to break their spirits. So I think if they put us through that, like even us as we are now with the internet and all the capabilities and possibilities that we have, if we had to go through the whipping and the hot sun and all of that, I don't think we would have had the spirit to fight like we fight now for BLM and ACAB and everything. We wouldn't have that same spirit because they took away the religion, they took away the spirituality, they took away the names and everything. That's why a lot of us have nicknames like last names like Dorsainville. That's not an African last name. They took away a lot from us, and I think if we, as we are now, had to go through that, we would not make it out, as strong as we are now.
absolutely. And as you're saying, I think I think it would break your spirit because any that type of trauma would break anybody. You know what I mean? Like right now, I feel like if we're thinking about it in that perspective, Gen Z is super high. You guys are on a high. You'd sober up pretty quickly. I would think in slavery times, it would, reality would hit pretty quick. And Rudy just said something very similar to what I was saying in the beginning. Like it's a thing of generations, hating on the last generation. You're like, oh, okay, well, that this was better in the last generation. Just like I think that you guys will probably have the same to say when it comes to alpha. When the alpha generation, you guys are gonna be looking at them like, what is this? And
Pretty
I feel
look
like
at
it's
them.
cyclical.
yeah. I think Gen Z's greatest strength is really our availability, like the fact that we have resources to us. I think that's what our greatest strength is. Because without the internet, we would be just like the past generations. We have this crazy tool at our fingertips, um, and that is really what we have kind of built ourselves around, um, and in both good and bad ways. But I think what Gen Z is known for, and being on the internet, um, is is great, and it's great for us. But without that, we would kind of be lost. Like we would be stuck in the same situations.
The comment says there are those who believe that Gen Z is in trouble because they lack social and life skills, they lack gratitude, problem solving, and relationship skills. I mean,
An increase in attitude and a decrease in self control. What are you looking? thoughts. I think that's all teenagers, though. I don't think that's just us. Social skills, like obviously the pandemic has affected that, but I think like
we do well socially. I
yeah,
mean, maybe it's because the older generation doesn't interact with us on as we do with one another. Because if you go to a high school, you're gonna see people talking. It's not just like, oh, we're all dead on our phones all the time. You know, sometimes it is a problem. Sometimes we are really connected to our devices, but we still interact with one another. I guess more so because we're able to talk with people we would never be able to speak with. You know, like Molly has a friend in California. We wouldn't be able to get that if we just, you know, didn't have phones to talk to people in different states. And I guess, you know, lacking gratitude and problem skills, I think that's just based on how you raised. Because if you lack gratitude, it's mostly because your parents didn't instill that quality in you, in my opinion. Because just because you have the internet doesn't mean you're going to be ungrateful for the things in your life. You know, if your parents are clothing you, feeding you, you're most likely going to be grateful that they're doing these basic things for you. I just think it's based on how your parents bring you up.
Yeah, and I think like problem solving, like relationships skills. In our meeting like last week, there was kind of the conversation of like, oh, you guys take things to social media. You guys don't know how to solve problems face to face. Yes, we have social media, but we still also fight and like do things like that. So I think like all the problems that the past generations have had with problem solving and like relationships still happen.
I think we're
There were
just
still
able
people who were
to.
passive aggressive. Like these are not like this is not a generational difference. It's just how like teens personally decide how they're going to solve a problem. And that I don't think that we're worse off because of the internet or because of anything like that. I think if anything, we have like resources like on Google and things like that to actually figure out how we want to go about this.
Yeah, different options.
Even
available.
if we don't go to our parents and figure out, oh, how can I solve this? We have like the option to go on Google and be like, what's a healthy way to tell your friend that they're being really bad to you? There's articles about that online. So, I mean, I think we're doing okay.
Well, I mean, I definitely want to say that like this has like really opened my eyes a lot. Like this whole conversation has helped me understand Gen Z a little better because honestly, I don't really talk to people like your age, like that young, excuse me, often. So it's hard for me to kind of like understand the perspective. Usually, the closest I have is my younger brother, who I kind of understand. Okay, I see like where the generation's heads at, but like to have this conversation and see really what you guys are really intrinsically thinking, that makes the entire difference. And I think that from the beginning of this live, when the question was what is the main difference, like what is the disconnect, the disconnect is we're not hearing each other, we're not understanding each other. Because what I see on social media is I had an image of Gen Z, but listening to you guys, I have a whole different understanding of where that passion comes from, and like, you know, the reasoning behind some of your actions. And you know, I see all the time, like, you know, online, millennials who are in their late 20s, like vehemently trying to distance themselves from Gen Z. They're like, we are not Gen Z, we are millennials, don't do that to me. Like it's the worst thing in the world. But like I understand now a little clearer, and I think that a lot of the things that you guys do are great. And we talked about the posting. Yes, you know, posting is like is one thing, but then after that there is some action put behind it as well. And honestly, if there was nobody posting, nobody would know anything. So it is important. It inspired me because I host a podcast called Breakdown to Lowdown. I was like, during that the whole time of that social and civil unrest during last summer, like, you know, I was like, okay, what can I do? You know, I was putting the donation links anywhere I could. I was plugging it anywhere I could, because I was like, I don't just want to share this on social media. I have a voice, I have a platform, let me exploit that, you know what I mean? And I think Gen Z was a big contributing factor to those decisions. So I thank you guys so much for that.
Yeah. Thank you. All right.
Addressing one of the comments that says Gen Z lacks self-control. I feel as though That's every generation, and it's not that our generation lacks more self-control than other generations. I think it's just that what is perceived to be okay is completely different in our generations. I don't want to say like I don't like the term we're more woke or we're more woke, but I think certain things that were okay, certain things that were okay in like 2010, 2000s, 1990, certain things that are okay were okay then are not okay now. And just because Gen Z reacts a different way or they're outraged or they're upset about the like because um I feel like the perception that I'll use this as an example, the perception of how the LGBTQ community was treated just let's just take 10 years ago, just it's completely different now. And I think that just because that doesn't make us more sensitive or that we lack self-control, but we're more outraged now because we see these problems and we want to address them. What you guys perceive as because you've had a lot more life experience and you've gone through a lot of things, and I feel like now since you've been through so much, you have a lesser reaction per se to certain things just because like you've when you live in a certain situation for a while you become desensitized to it. So I don't think it's that we're more I don't think that we lack self-control. It's that we speak out more when we see a problem.
Yeah.
We speak out, and I don't think that means we lack self-control. That just means we're more willing to address a problem head on than other people are. And sometimes that might be perceived as disrespect, but
Yeah, I think Gen Z is not going to do something just for traditionalism's sake.
Yeah, because I think we have more perspectives. We don't have to just listen to our parents before.
Or the people in our community. Like, we
Yeah.
have greater reach, and we have greater reach to opinions that might not match our own at that time, and that has a greater influence on us.
There's a comment that says, what do you think the biggest issue Gen Z has to deal with?
The environment.
Before you guys get into that question, I just want to say I have to jump out real quick. I didn't want to just leave, but I want to thank you guys for this. And you guys can ask me back anytime. I just have another meeting to get to. But if anybody wants to keep up with me or follow me, it's at Nikki Music on social media, at NICKYMUSIQUE. The music is spelled in French. And I commend you guys and keep the conversation going. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
So yeah, I think our biggest issue is the environment, because that is slowly decaying, and it's been slowly decaying for a long, long time. But it's getting much worse, much faster in our generation, and unfortunately, we do not have the power of legislation behind us currently. And I think that's something that more people need to focus on, because that affects all of us indiscriminately. But yeah, what do you guys think, like, the biggest issue that we have to deal with outside of like our families, I guess?
I think the biggest issue currently is us communicating with other people, whether it be people of our own generation or people from previous or from future generations. I think that although we try to stay united, there is a big separation between us, not only in our ideals, but in our everyday life or how we were raised. And so I think that's a big issue, because if we don't keep talking to one another, or at least trying to be open with one another, I don't think we're going to get to the place we want to be. Like you said before, people have said before, how we see, like, how we're not strategic. And yes, of course, there are certain things that we could handle better, but we don't. And because of that, I think if we could have people from the previous generations not guiding us or helping us out essentially, but
Collaborate.
guess like giving us like tips and tricks that would be helpful, because I think it's essential that we all work together rather than us like Gen Z just going out and just doing everything how we want, not as how we want, but we're fighting for the things that we want rather than just us doing it by ourselves, when we should be doing it together.
Um, Serious comment says, what do you think the biggest issue Gen Z has to deal with? And I think it's simultaneously a lot of the other generations expect us to do so much stuff because of how we kind of took the lead somewhat with the past issues, and also the older generations thinking that we can't do anything about it and we are powerless. So like we're stuck in the middle of getting pulled in different directions where they expect us to do a lot and the other side doesn't think we're capable of doing what the other side wants us to do, and everyone puts pressure on us without realizing it, and then there's a divide that gets bigger and bigger as the expectations grow and as the issues grow, and as we try to solve more problems, that a lot of people don't take us seriously because of the older generation stigma that they place on us.
I think it's a lot harder because there's so much, and Kate was mentioning this as well. There's so much pressure on us to solve these problems. The older generations are still here. Like they
can help out at any
everyone
time.
is just as capable to be in this fight together. And when we are together, we are our strongest.
Yeah, I do think the biggest problem is probably just ideology as a whole, because even though Gen Z, we do seem more I don't like that, like woke, like we're more aware. There's still a lot of people that aren't aware. They don't think certain things are problems,
Or
you know,
they don't care.
or they still get misinformation. I just feel like because we have different avenues to get information, whether it's good or bad, sometimes it can affect us as a whole, like how we see ourselves. Like rape culture, some people still think that, oh yeah, if a person was drunk, well then they practically have free reign to do whatever they want to that person without their consent. It's their fault. And it's still in our generation, as much as we speak out against it, there's still a lot of people who are in power or are affected by their families that still have that information being funneled to them, which affects our legislation, all these, at least in the US. But yeah, I just feel like ideology as a whole just affects honestly every generation, but ours a lot too.
Yeah.
Even in simple things like us constantly calling out racism and hate against Asians and all of that in the community, or even simple stuff like deeming the R word as a slur when it's used towards, people with different abilities. And we get called sensitive for it, but it's just because we're trying to protect people in our community. We get called sensitive for that a lot when they just don't understand what it is we're trying to do.
Yeah. I think there definitely is like and there's always been a disconnect. It's hard to talk to your parents about things that you care about. As a teenager, like that's not something that's new. What is new though is that our entire lives are broadcast on the internet. So we are like under a little microscope all the time, constantly, consistently. Everybody wants to know what Gen Z is doing. Everybody is trying to figure out what TikTok is. And there's like jokes on TikTok. Watch out, if you post this, you're gonna end up on Fox News.
Bye.
So I think like there's a lot of pressure on us because they can see what we're doing. We don't really have I don't even want to call it the benefit. We don't really have the benefit of the doubt. What you see is what you get from Gen Z, the good and the bad. There's another conversation going on in the comments about
Gen Z and our spiritual illiteracy
and our spiritual lives. I think I want to say that if Gen Z is spiritually illiterate or anything like that, it's because they were driven from the church. And Rudy was saying it's challenging the institution. And truthfully, in Christianity, there are certain institutions, Black church, white church, that I don't want to stand for. Like, I don't want to go to a church that is going to allow like me to be SLUT shamed for wearing a skirt that's too high at 13. I think there is a lot of things that like bled into the church or were started by the church that have kind of pushed this generation away. And once again, we can see it because we can talk to each other about it. And so we aren't we don't feel as forced to conform to this ideal because other people are like, yeah, no, that felt weird to me too.
Mhm.
Like we don't feel pressured to be like, oh yeah, this is fine.
Yeah, I think being part of the church, I don't want to tolerate certain behaviors. If it makes me uncomfortable, I will leave. I don't want to stay in a church that will just, allow me to be, I don't know the word, just someone curse, but just allow me to just be uncomfortable. Like, it's supposed to be a safe space for a reason. But if you're allowing your preachers or your churchgoers to get away with certain behavior, it makes sense now that people, as they're growing up and seeing these behaviors or experiencing it, they're not going to want to stay in the church. I do feel like it's important for parents, if they want, well, if they're part of the church or any religion, to be honest, to have their children go to churches that are safe spaces and don't let them be abused by that church, I feel like one of the biggest problems is their parents experience that abuse from the church. So they're like, no, this is normal. This is how church is, You can't do certain behaviors or, someone might touch you in an inappropriate way when it's just like, no, they shouldn't do that behavior to begin with. So I just think that responsibility kind of falls on the parents at a certain time, but they also shouldn't push their religion too much because that also takes people away from the church. So
I think if the church wants to retain members, it has to the hypocritical nature of it, because they expect perfection when the members aren't perfect, and even with each other. Like I remember going to church with other people, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're such a bad kid. You're that girl. If you knew what the gossip was about you." So I think it's hard. So I think if the church was more honest about what the purpose was and about what we want to and what we want to do and how we want to grow and move forward as people as well as Christians, people wouldn't leave the church.
I have to go, but
I think
I
like
really
go ahead.
exactly. Yeah, I'm just saying I have to go, but I really enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully we can do it again sometime. All right, bye.
Thank you.
Okay, I think in line with what Rudy was saying, what she said, why should I go to a church that allows racism or sexism? That's one of my biggest problems with the church because they tend to use the Bible and certain phrases, like they pick and choose what they want to excuse racism and homophobia and transphobia and every different kind of phobia. They seem to find a verse that stands up for them and agrees with them, but they won't. Even the 10 Commandments, simple things like thou shalt not commit adultery or stuff like you're not even supposed to wear two different kinds of materials. They pick and choose what they think is right and what they think is wrong according to the Bible, and then that gets passed on to everybody else, and we get to face the judgment of it because we don't want to follow the church. Also, where I'm from, the Caribbean, my biggest problem with the church here is the corruption is very rampant, in which like churches have seem to use more for money because you see their donation baskets and whatnot, and they claim that it's for the church to repair the church and whatnot, but like in the following month you see the pastor drive in a Mercedes brand new and the church is still in the same condition of disrepair. So they use the donation money for their own good, and it's not for the church, it's not for the people, it's for the pastors.
Yeah. And I also feel like churches don't allow the youth to speak up about problems and allow them to be properly involved. The church is of, be seen, not heard. It gives that energy, It's just, if you want people to stay in the church, I feel like get them involved in the right ways. Listen to concerns they might have, like, oh yeah, pastor, you might have said this on the pulpit, but here's how I interpret it instead. And then you are able to open conversations in the church. It shouldn't be just one person telling you how this religion goes or how the Bible is, or this is how you should perceive whatever deity you believe in. It should be an open discussion.
Yeah. Well, it is hitting 1:17. This was a great conversation. I'm glad that everyone could be on. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Nix. Thank you, Kate. I know I kind of sprung this on you. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this show.
Thank you for participating.
Yeah. I know it can be really nerve-wracking, but I just want to say thank you. Gen Z, we still have a long way to go, but I think if we all work together, like Gen Z and the older generations, we can move a lot faster if we were just by ourselves. Alrighty.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.